Based on my personal experience, very few people seem to care about their liver. Certainly not in the same way they care about their heart or kidneys. And I find this truly strange because when you work in medicine, you begin to understand the liver says much more about a person's overall health than is commonly believed. The thing is, other organs send obvious signals when something goes wrong. If your lungs are suffering, you get out of breath climbing the stairs. If the brain starts to fail, you notice it in your thinking, memory, or mood. If there are kidney problems, you often see it right there in the toilet. But the liver works quietly in the background, performing hundreds and hundreds of tasks simultaneously. And it doesn't send clear distress signals, at least not in the early stages. Over my years as a doctor, I have reviewed literally thousands of blood test results. And here is what I can tell you. Your liver markers almost always correlate with how unhealthy a person is overall. When I look at a full set of labs, liver tests are often the first thing that tells me which direction a patient's health is heading. Long before people feel seriously ill, long before anything manifests drastically, the liver is already starting to give subtle hints. And most people, and to be honest, many doctors don't pay enough attention to these early signals. So, this video is exactly about that. Not about end-stage liver disease, not about jaundice or liver failure. We'll talk about those later. Today, we are talking about early dysfunction, the kind that is often completely reversible if caught in time. And in the vast majority of cases, it is directly linked to your metabolic health, specifically fatty liver disease, which is now the most common liver condition in the world. If you are here for the first time, welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Alex. I've been working as a physician in countries like Ukraine and Poland for 13 years, and now my mission is to help you avoid the terminal stages of the diseases I see every day. Before we get into specific signs, it's helpful to briefly break down what the liver does every day, because the scale of its work is usually greatly underestimated. Your liver essentially filters your blood. Every drop of blood leaving the intestines passes through the liver before going anywhere else in the body. It regulates glucose levels, deciding how much sugar to store and how much to release into the bloodstream. It processes dietary fats and produces bile, which is necessary to break them down. It produces blood clotting factors that keep you from bleeding out during an injury, and it neutralizes toxins, medications, alcohol, and other products of metabolic breakdown. This is a massive number of functions performed simultaneously. Therefore, when the liver begins to struggle, especially when fat begins to accumulate inside the liver cells, which is the earliest stage of metabolic liver disease, all these systems begin to wobble. At first, imperceptibly, very subtly, and that is why these 7 signs are so important. The first sign on the list today is fatigue, and before you roll your eyes and think, oh, that's too vague to be useful, stay with me for a minute, because this is a very specific kind of fatigue that most people misunderstand. One of the liver's central roles is managing glycogen stores, which are your body's short-term energy reserves stored in liver cells and released into the blood when sugar levels drop. When fat begins to accumulate in those same cells, it disrupts the insulin signaling that controls this process. The result is what is called hepatic insulin resistance, a state where the liver stops responding correctly to insulin's commands. Blood sugar regulation becomes erratic. Instead of stable energy throughout the day, you get spikes and crashes. On top of that, early liver dysfunction tends to generate low-grade systemic inflammation, which is itself energy intensive. Your immune system is constantly running on high, quietly burning resources. The fatigue resulting from this isn't that pleasant tiredness you feel after a hard workout or a productive day. It is a background exhaustion that doesn't go away after sleep. People often describe it as feeling like they are running at 50% capacity, even on days when nothing particularly tiring happened. This discrepancy, fatigue without a clear cause, is a detail worth paying attention to. Moving on to the second sign, which has a metabolic connection most people don't suspect. A growing waistline isn't just subcutaneous fat, the soft fat you can pinch under the skin. What is more clinically significant is visceral fat. I mentioned this in almost every video, Monsa. It accumulates deep in the abdominal cavity around your organs. Now, visceral fat and liver fat aren't just neighbors, they actively stimulate each other's growth. Visceral fat dumps fatty acids directly into the portal vein, which leads straight to the liver. Essentially, it's a constant fat drip into the liver tissue, which accelerates the development of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Research consistently shows that waist circumference is one of the strongest predictors of fatty liver disease, even in people who don't look fat. You can have a normal weight on paper, but still carry enough visceral and liver fat to be at metabolic risk. This is a phenomenon called TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. This is why we always prioritize the waist to height ratio. Your waist in centimeters should be less than half your height. If you are 180 centimeters tall, your waist should ideally be below 90 centimeters. If you are 160 centimeters, it should be less than 80 centimeters. These numbers aren't arbitrary, they reflect the point where visceral fat accumulation starts affecting your organ function. The third sign is often simply filed away and forgotten. These are mildly elevated liver enzymes in a routine blood test, specifically those called ALT, AST, and GGT. Usually when people are told their results are slightly outside the normal range, they don't give it much thought. Their doctor might not pay attention either, but in a clinical context, small elevations in these markers, even within what some labs still consider acceptable, can be important or early signals. ALT, alanine aminotransferase, is the most liver-specific enzyme. It lives inside liver cells and appears in elevated concentrations in the blood only when those cells are damaged or under stress. Persistently elevated ALT, even at a level some guidelines classify as borderline, is often the earliest biochemical footprint of fatty liver. Gamma GT, GGT, is particularly sensitive to alcohol consumption and also rises with oxidative stress within liver tissues. The problem is that because these elevations are quite modest, they are easy to ignore. I would say to anyone who has these markers flagged as high, even slightly in their labs, do not ignore it. Retake the test, get a second opinion, ask for a liver ultrasound if, based on what you've read, you think it's necessary. This is the stage where early intervention becomes incredibly effective. Next is a symptom that people often find hard to describe, a vague sense of fullness, pressure, or a dull ache in the upper right part of the abdomen where the liver is located, what we call the right upper quadrant. The liver is situated right here under the rib cage. This is covered by a fibrous sheath called the capsule. In fatty disease, the accumulation of fat enlarges the liver tissue, and as the organ expands, this capsule stretches. Yes, the capsule itself contains pain receptors, and when stretched, it creates a dull, non-specific discomfort. This isn't sharp pain like kidney stones or appendicitis. It's easily confused with digestive bloating, a pulled muscle, or general abdominal discomfort. We all have stomach aches from time to time. Many live with this sensation for months without connecting it to the liver. And why would they, if a doctor hasn't pointed out the connection yet? The key distinction is whether this sensation is persistent, localized specifically in the upper right area, and associated with other signals from this list. In that context, it is truly worth investigating. Number 5 is worsening sugar control. This point is at the very heart of metabolic health. The liver is arguably the most important organ in glucose regulation. The liver acts as the body's glucose buffer, absorbing excess sugar from the bloodstream after a meal and releasing it back when levels drop. When fat saturates the liver cells, this regulation breaks down. The liver becomes resistant to insulin, meaning it continues to dump glucose into the blood even when levels are already high. This is what we call inappropriate hepatic glucose production. As a result, blood sugar levels begin to rise steadily. You might notice your HbA1c, glycated hemoglobin, the 3-month average sugar level, slowly creeping up in your annual test results. You might feel more tired after eating or notice strong sugar cravings as the body tries to compensate for energy instability. This is the metabolic trajectory toward type 2 diabetes. And often this trajectory begins right in the liver. Moving on to something less obvious, changes in appetite and how quickly you feel full. Low-grade liver inflammation interferes with the normal hormonal signals that regulate hunger and fullness, particularly the hormones leptin and ghrelin. An enlarged liver can also physically press against the stomach, creating a mechanical reason for feeling full early. Consequently, portions that used to seem normal now feel excessive after just a couple of bites. Or the very thought of food, especially in the morning, stops being appealing. This isn't the same as conscious intermittent fasting or a habit of skipping breakfast. It is a shift in your baseline appetite that happens gradually and is usually only noticed in hindsight. The 7th sign on the list, which is usually blamed on anything but the liver, is nausea or general discomfort after eating fatty or heavy meals. Here is why this happens. Your liver produces bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. Bile is what the body uses to break down fats. When the liver is functioning poorly, this entire process becomes sluggish. Fatty food isn't processed properly, followed by that familiar heaviness after eating, bloating, nausea, or just feeling unwell for a couple of hours. Most people assume they have a sensitive stomach, IBS, or that certain foods just don't agree with them anymore. Sometimes that's true. But when it happens regularly alongside other signs, it stops looking like a food intolerance and starts forming a clear metabolic picture. Let me end with something practical because I know how frustrating it is to watch a video like this and not know what to do next. We all know how hard it is to get a doctor's appointment these days. But if something in this video resonated with you, if you recognize symptoms you've been ignoring for months or years, you need to insist on an appointment. Hoje ist specifically ask for basic blood tests, liver enzymes, fasting glucose, lipid profile, the full picture. If your doctor refuses or the wait is too long, consider a private screening. I know this isn't what everyone wants to hear, but think about this. We spend billions a year on supplements or health foods, many of which have no proven efficacy. A private blood test that actually tells you what is happening inside your body is perhaps one of the best ways to spend that money. It won't solve systemic healthcare problems, but it can help your individual situation. More and more people are doing exactly this, annual private checkups to keep track of their numbers. The main takeaway of this video: don't write off vague symptoms simply as aging, especially if you aren't that old yet. If any of these signs seem familiar, a doctor should sit down with you, take a history, ask about your lifestyle, and examine you. Literally put their hands on your abdomen, not just glance at a single test and send you home. And a phone consultation is certainly not enough for this. But there is also truly good news. Unlike most organs, the liver has a remarkable capacity for regeneration, especially at this early stage before anything serious has started. Research consistently shows that losing just 5 to 10% of body weight leads to a measurable reduction in liver fat and, in some cases, completely normalizes enzyme levels. This isn't an overwhelming amount of weight, and it is achievable for most. And the measures with the strongest evidence base are actually not complicated. Reducing ultra-processed foods, decreasing alcohol, improving sleep, and increasing fiber intake which feeds the gut bacteria that lower inflammation in the liver itself. For most people watching, this is not a hopeless situation. If some of these 7 signs match, take it as a metabolic wake-up call. It's not necessarily a diagnosis, nah? The liver is simply quietly sending you information right now. And you can act on that information. And the sooner you do, the better the result will be.